Hi, my name is Laura McMillan. Hi, and welcome to Commercial Composting 101, co-hosted by North Carolina DEQ and EPA Region 4. My name is Laura McMillan, and I'm an employee here at EPA Region 4 in Atlanta. And I primarily work on food waste reduction, because this is a lot of what I do. Before we start, some logistics here. You can enter questions on the GoToMeeting control panel on the right hand of your screen. You can either send them either directly to me. My name is D. Rogers under there, but just because that's who our accounts register under. And I'll try to answer them as they come in. If I can't answer them, we can ask them at the end of the session. Additionally, after each presenter, we'll take 1 to 2 questions. And also on that box on the right hand of your screen, that toolbar, you can click the Handouts tab, and you can look at all the presentations for our presenters today and download them right from there. This webinar will be recorded, and we will have it up on NCDEQ's website within a couple of days, and I'm sure they will share that with everyone. And lastly, if we can go to the next slide, Jorge. This is a disclaimer just about EPA's role in this, so I'll give you a few seconds to read it over. All right, well, thank you so much, and now I'll hand it over to Jorge.
Great, thank you, Laura. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you guys so much for listening in. I think some of the things that I will talk about in the very beginning are going to be pretty common knowledge for some people, but I just want to make sure that everybody, we just launch off in the right place. We'll have a couple of other really good presentations from Craig and Gary as well. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm the Organics Recycling Specialist for the State Recycling Program at DEQ. I've been in this position for about over 2 years now, and actually Craig Coker had this position. He was the first one to serve in this position. I provide complementary technical assistance in permitting, logistics, equipment, stormwater management, and information to organic waste generators and processors like composting facilities and anaerobic digesters. Before this, my experience lied in solid waste and landfill engineering and international sustainable development with Peace Corps and Engineers Without Borders. I'm an engineering training and have an undergrad in environmental engineering from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and a master's in biological and agricultural engineering from NC State. So before we get started, I just want to wish you all a happy International Compost Awareness Week. This is the winning poster from the contest put on by the Composting Council Research and Education Foundation that happens every year, and it's beautiful. You can get a copy from them, and they're having a couple of other events this week advertised on their website, and you can learn more about how to get involved on the International Compost Awareness Week website under CCREF's website. So, like I mentioned earlier, I work for the recycling program at NCDEQ. It's a non-regulatory program that provides technical assistance and grant funding to expand the recycling infrastructure in the state. Local governments, private recycling businesses, and recycling nonprofits can apply for grants. Our work with our clients is confidential and complementary, and often we inquire to the regulatory groups on behalf of our clients. We also manage the North Carolina Recycling Markets Directory, which lists most, hopefully all of the recyclers in the state. So if you're not listed and you provide a recycling service, you should be on that markets directory. And also we manage the NC Waste Shredder, which lists the hard to recycle items. So if you're looking for some stuff to recycle that is not so common, you can also go find some stuff there. So in this Commercial Composting 101 presentation, we're going to focus on large-scale composting. We're not going to focus on backyard composting. However, many of the basic principles will apply. So this is a glimpse at the scale that we'll be talking about today, using large machinery to make large quantities of compost in large and small areas. So just in North Carolina, we have over 70 permitted composting sites ranging from less than 2 acres to over 100 acres operated by public solid waste programs and by private recycling businesses. The state passed a yard waste landfill ban in 1993 that helped spur some composting activity. And in 96, the compost rules were adopted to create a regulatory pathway for people that wanted to begin to compost at a large scale. This permitting also required annual reporting, which I use on an annual basis to understand the composting trends in the state. Also important to note that the compost rule readoption process has started. This means that the permitting groups will seek industry input to improve the rules through the next 1 to 3 years. It's going to be a long process, and they really want to hear from everybody that's making compost around the state. So just 2 years ago, about 50 composting facilities or so permitted under the NCDEQ Division of Waste Management manufactured over 500,000 tons of products, sold roughly 60% of it. The rest was used on site or was just given away for free. The majority of these products were mulch and grade A compost, which can be used anywhere, no restrictions. There are 2 other groups within NCDEQ that permit composting facilities. If you're looking to compost mainly biosolids, then you will be permitted under NCDEQ Division of Water Resources Non-Discharge Permitting Unit. And if you're looking to compost mainly animal manures, then you will be permitted under NCDEQ Division of Water Resources Animal Feeding Operations. It can get a little complicated, so if you have any questions, just reach out to me. So let's get on the same page about compost. Let's define it. So we'll use the U.S. Composting Council's definition. So compost is the end product of a controlled biological decomposition of organic matter, being food waste, yard trims, paper, newspaper, animal manures, biosolids, etc., that is sanitized through the generation of heat and stabilized to a point that is beneficial to plant growth. Generation of heat. This heat is generated by the microbial activity in the compost. The microbes are breathing, eating, procreating, moving, and generating heat through biochemical reactions. To meet most states' regulations, this heat in the composting process will most likely have to meet the quote-unquote PFRP requirement. PFRP stands for Process to Further Reduce Pathogens. Most states, including the U.S. Composting Council model rules, recommend holding temperatures, or they don't recommend, but they actually require holding temperatures of 131 degrees Fahrenheit or higher for 15 days or longer with a minimum of 5 turns in between, or 5 days if you're doing in-vessel composting or ASP composting, which we'll talk about later, to reach this requirement. The minimum of 5 turns is for windrow systems, which I'll show you in a little bit, to make sure that the spaces that are not part of the center of the windrow, of the core of the pile, will get a chance to get in that core after each turn and get a chance to get heated up. This time frame allows the heat to reduce the amount of pathogens in the composting mixture to acceptable levels, as well as to kill seeds in the composting mixture. So I won't go into this too much, but I just want to mention that compost really helps to increase the organic matter in the soil, which leads to all of these beneficial functions once it's applied on the soil. So let's make some compost. But before we make compost, let's get some questions asked and let our minds begin to wonder. So what is the source of the material? Where's it going to come from? Where are we going to compost? How are we going to compost? Who will move the feedstocks? Who will bring them to the facility? Who will move them out of the facility? Who's going to buy the end product? And how is the operation going to be maintained financially? So these are just some starting questions for every facility to have in mind before they begin to compost. So this is a quick, in very general terms, this is the composting cycle. You collect materials to be composted. You prepare them with the right ratios, the right amount of water. You actively compost it, and then you let it cure. Then it becomes more stable so that it's ready to be used by your market. You can screen your material. You send some samples to be tested at the lab. You pass those tests, and then you send the compost to the markets. Most likely, the markets will grow plants that will have an organic byproduct that can then go back to your facility to be composted. So we can say that this is the composting process. You use your feedstocks to make your compost piles, and in it, your pile will have naturally occurring microbes, oxygen, and moisture. The interaction of all of this will lead to the creation of course, compost, but also some byproducts, such as water vapor, methane, carbon dioxide, heat, volatile organic compounds, quote-unquote odors, and leachates. You could technically harness each and one of them and use them in some beneficial way, but for now, let's just be aware that, that we just need to keep them in mind, and you will need to reduce some of them to keep operating under your permits, most likely. These are leachate, processed water, and odors. So we can utilize the compost on sports fields, farms, landscaping, green infrastructure projects, highway right-of-ways, any sort of greenery, nurseries, and any place that has soil, basically. It's important to know who is going to use your compost, because you can modify your process to meet that demand. And different markets will pay different prices for the compost. So before we look into the different composting systems, let's keep this list in mind. You have to know if you're going to be doing an outdoor versus an indoor system. Depends on whether you're in urban or rural area. If you're going to be using aerated systems, is it going to be passive or active? Are you going to cover your piles and leave them uncovered? Are you going to have a shed on top or not? How much capital do you have? Are you going to be running in-vessel systems? Are they going to be continuous or batch systems? If you have piles, are they static or are they turned? So just showing you a few different pieces of equipment that you can use to make compost: a pull behind windrow turner or a front end loader. These are some straddle turners, so for very large facilities. You can minimize space in between your windrows and really maximize the use of your overall facility area. These are some examples of aerated static piles and some covers to control odors a little bit more. Some of the systems utilize a microcontroller to fluctuate the air that flows through the pile based on temperature, and some even use moisture. This is some examples of in-vessel systems. Oh, my timer just went off, so I got another minute to wrap up here. This is some in-vessel systems. Some of them are for continuous flow-through systems, and the other ones are just batch systems. And lastly, we have vermiculture or warm composting. This is an example out in New York, and it's a very large-scale dairy manure warm composting system. And it utilizes red worms to decompose organic matter. No matter the type of system that you choose, you need to think about monitoring equipment. You will at least need a temperature probe and some sort of way to keep track of your measurements, whether it's a spreadsheet or some software. And the last piece of equipment that I'll show you are screeners. So depending on your market, again, you'll want to screen to different sizes. For example, nurseries may want finer material than orchards. And also depending on the amount of material that you create, you will want to look into leasing a screener once or a couple of times a year instead of owning one. Lastly, these are two examples of voluntary certifications for your end product: the U.S. Composting Council Seal of Testing Assurance and the OMRI listed certification. If you want to go into the organic farm market, you want to look into OMRI. And each one has their benefits and their details and different costs as well. There are many trainings that are taught throughout the year, mainly by the U.S. Composting Council and SWANA as well. The main compost team has another really good training, and also one that I know about is the O2 compost training that focuses on aerated composting systems. The U.S. Composting Council puts on about 5 or so a year, and I help co-teach part of the U.S. Composting Council's course that takes place here in Raleigh alongside the NC Composting Council. It's a super hands-on training, 5 days, includes a tour of 3 composting facilities: McGill, City of Raleigh, and Universal Leaf. And this year we're adding a tour of the NC Department of Ag Soil Lab. So if you have any questions, let me know, or just visit carolinacompost.com/events. And the last thing that I'll let you guys know is the U.S. Composting Council Conference will be taking place in Atlanta in January 2018. So I highly encourage everybody to attend and check out the pre-conference workshops that get taught at this conference. So with that, I thank you, and I'm going to pass it on to Craig. So let's do this. And we're going to do questions at the end. So Craig, passing it on to you, and I'm going to read I'm going to do an introduction for you, and then I'll mute myself. So Craig Coker is an environmental scientist and engineer with over 35 years of experience in the planning, permitting, design, construction, and operation of organics recycling facilities using several composting and digestion technologies. In addition to running Coker Composting and Consulting, he is a senior editor at Biocycle magazine. Craig is a licensed waste management facility operator and a certified nutrient management planner. Craig has an undergraduate degree in environmental science from the University of Virginia and a graduate degree in sanitary engineering from George Washington University. He serves on the board of directors of the Virginia Recycling Association. Passing it on to you, Craig.
Thank you, Jorge, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk to you a little bit about odor management in composting facilities. This is, without a doubt, the most significant aspect of managing a composting facility, and it's an issue that all composters must take very seriously because it is the #1 issue that can cause a facility to be shut down. Right before we began this webinar, I ran a Google search on the phrase composting facilities and odor problems and came up with almost 2,000 news articles about composting facilities and odor problems. So this is a big deal and we all need to pay a lot of attention to it. In the diagram here, you see the human olfactory system, which is how people register odors. Interestingly enough, and what complicates odor management is each of us has a different set of odor response systems or sensors in our noses because of our different DNA, which is why some people like the smell of blue cheese dressing, some people do not. This is what makes odor management in composting very challenging. Now, as Jorge said, composting odors are essentially volatile organic compounds. These are formed in the routine decomposition of the organic chemical bonds that we are breaking in our composting process. And these volatile organic compounds become gases. They're emitted to the atmosphere. They tend to be transient, that is, they change with regard to time, and very changeable, not only in terms of time, but also distance and chemically. They are subjectively offensive. I find, the smell of leaf composting to be relatively pleasant. I have talked to citizens who find the smell of leaf composting totally obnoxious. All very subjective. But the good news is odors are manageable. All facilities should have an odor management plan that addresses these 3 topics. What are the sources of odors at your facility, and what are your mitigation options for dealing with the problem? How are you going to monitor for odors? And if a complaint comes in, how are you going to handle the complaint? And we'll touch on all 3 of these. It's important to understand what the odor chain is. The odor chain consists of 3 parts. You have odors formed in a compost pile due to improperly mixed feedstock, a carbon-nitrogen ratio is out of whack, you got in a very unpleasant feedstock from a source that was odorous. However, whatever happens, you've got odors being formed. Those odors have to be transported across a distance, and they have to be perceived by the receptor, which in this case is the human nose. And that has to engender some form of reaction. So you have formation, you have off-site transport, and you have perception and reaction. Now, odors come from a variety of sources on site. This data is from a study of a odor problem in Oregon a few years ago. Notice how much came out of their biofilter. 30% of the odors came out of the biofilter, which was telling the investigators here that the biofilter was not working properly. And it was due to short circuiting. I'll explain that here in a minute. These are some of the compounds that we find in composting. Some of these are associated with biosolids, which are obviously a very odorous source. But the important thing to note here is on the right-hand column here, detection threshold, parts per million by volume. Keep in mind that 1 part per million is the equivalent of 1 inch in 15.8 miles. 1 inch in 15.8 miles. That's 1 part per million. Look at these numbers. These are very fractions of a part per million. And these are the detection thresholds where a receptor, a human nose, can say, oh, I recognize, I can detect an odor. It's not the same as the recognition threshold in which the receptor would say, oh, I recognize that smell, it's hydrogen sulfide. That's usually a higher number, but the detection threshold is where the human nose can detect an odorous chemical, and some of these numbers are extremely low. It's important that feedstock come in and be managed properly. Many facilities are now looking at the options for composting food waste. Food waste can be a very problematic material for a couple of reasons. As you see here, the food waste that are hauled in a truck tend to get what I call liquidous in transport. So when you crack open the back gate of your truck, you're going to get, if you're standing near there, you're going to get wet. So we recommend that all composting facilities handling challenging feedstocks discharge onto some absorbing material, mulch, paper, sawdust, anything that will soak up that liquid, and they can be easily and quickly folded into the compost pile in order to cut down on the opportunity for odors. Keep in mind that some of these trucks delivering food waste to a facility have been on the road for several days, and what's in that truck has already started to get fairly stinky. Lack of oxygen is the main reason we find odors in composting, with the exception of the woody smell that comes from yard waste or ammonia, which are formed for different reasons. Most odors form in anaerobic pockets in the pile. Now you see in this diagram we have some compost particles. The particles are surrounded by a thin biofilm. This is where the microbes live and do their work decomposing the particles. Air transfers into the pile through these pore spaces. You have to have good free airspace in a pile in order for that oxygen to transfer into the pile. Now, those who are using a turning system, like a turn windrow composting system, by turning it, you release some of the odors that are trapped in that pile. You can re-aerate, but that re-aeration does not last long. As you see here in this graph, you know, the percent of oxygen climbs rapidly after you turn a compost pile or turn a compost windrow. That stimulates microbial activity, it raises oxygen demand in the pile, and your oxygen curve starts to drop off. So here you are 20 minutes later, and your oxygen has been depleted. So the only way to keep that pile aerobic, to minimize the opportunity for anaerobic odors to form, is by good porosity and good free airspace. You must have good structural porosity in every compost pile. We see more and more the use of biocovers to help suppress odors. And this is a case where you take either wood chips in the lower photograph or finished compost, unscreened compost in the upper photograph, and cover it to a certain depth, roughly 6 to 8 inches of cover. Now, one drawback here is you see this loader operator's got his bucket over the far side of this windrow where my pointer is, and he's dumping the compost on the downhill side of the windrow. This is going to throttle the air coming in because windrows breathe by hot air exiting through the top, cool air coming in through the sides. So when you do this kind of biocover, you only want it to be within you don't want to cover the bottom 2 feet of a windrow, because you want that windrow to be able to breathe and get fresh air in there to offset the air that's rising up, the heated air rising up through this compost biocover. Research has shown that these covers will reduce volatile organic compound emissions by up to 90%. This is a graph of some research done in California where VOCs are a regulated air pollutant. And we see in the blue graph VOC emissions through a typical compost windrow. Notice in the first 15 days is when you get your maximum VOC emissions. But with the compost cap, those VOC emissions are very controlled. Permeable covers are becoming increasingly popular in some operations, both for turned windrows, as you see here. This is Black Bear Composting in Virginia. And this one are microporous fabric covers made by the Gore Company. This one is Seattle, Washington, and I've forgotten where this one is. But these are permeable membranes. In the case of the Gore covers, the pore sizes of the fabric are so small that the molecules of water vapor can get out, but the bigger molecules of odors cannot. So you get a significant reduction of odors with permeable covers. You also have opportunities for treating the air with biofiltration. If you have room at your site for a biofilter, it's a very inexpensive and effective way of treating compost odors. Basically, you extract the air from the piles and discharge it into these other, what really are sort of like compost piles, more mulch than compost, but very similar. So in a biofilter, the organic compounds get absorbed into an aqueous layer and onto the media surface, and the microbes degrade the chemicals that are causing the odors. So the media to support the microbes is usually a blend of compost, bark, wood chips. Again, you have to have good porosity for the exhaust gas to pass through, but not too fast. You remember earlier I said the problem at that Oregon facility was their biofilter short-circuited. And that's because the biofilter dried out and cracks formed in the biofilter material that allowed the odors to short circuit to the atmosphere. So you have to keep a biofilter moist. You have to have enough depth so that the gas residence time in the biofilter is on the order of 45 seconds or so. This is a cross-section of a biofilter. You have it at a slope so that the exhaust air, which is highly saturated, the condensate from that exhaust air can drain out. You have a gravel layer that acts as an air plenum to distribute the air evenly, and then the exhaust air rises up through the layer of mulch and compost, through the various pores in the process, and biodegrades the odorous chemicals. The second part of your odor management plan has to be on monitoring how you're going to know there are problems. You have to understand how odors disperse in the atmosphere and the concept of dilution to threshold. Now, those of us in the environmental industry have long been taught never say dilution is the solution to pollution. But in reality, with regard to odors, that's exactly what it is. These chemical concentrations are diluted in the atmosphere by both vertical and horizontal mixing of air. Horizontal mixing is called wind. Vertical mixing is a phenomenon created by the temperature of the atmosphere being warmed by the sun. You can model the impacts of odor distribution by looking at the topography. There are computer models available if you want to get into that level of detail, but all facilities should have a simple little MET station like you see here. I buy mine from forestry supplies, and they're usually about $800 or $900, and they record wind speed and direction and rainfall and a variety of other parameters, all linked back to your computer, so you have it right there at your fingertips, what the meteorological conditions at your site are at all times. You can also construct what's called a wind rose. This is a graph of surface wind and direction. So in this facility here, we see the predominant wind direction is to the south, followed by to the southwest, and then third to the west. And the different colors of the wind rows indicate different wind speeds. These are useful when you're siting a facility so that you can lay your facility out on a site, recognizing what the prevailing wind directions and speeds are. Monitoring protocols have to be done by people who are not on site all the time, because one problem with working in our industry is we become used to the odors, and you don't smell as well after you've been working in composting for a while. So use somebody who isn't on site, a friend, a neighbor, a relative, and have them do a routine evaluation around the site. And if somebody detects odors, you really need to investigate where it's coming from, make sure management knows about it before the phone starts to ring, make sure you understand what off-site impact there might be, develop remedies, and document the heck out of everything. This is an odor monitoring situation at a client of mine in Minnesota. This is an open prairie. So these houses on the north side here have a direct line of sight. Every morning at 5:30, an industrial hygienist makes a route, runs through these routes at each one of these monitoring stations to check for odors, and records their observations. Now, the industrial hygienist does not work at the facility. He's an off-site person, and so his odor sensing ability is fresh. But this is the kind of perimeter odor monitoring protocol that I recommend for all facilities. The last element of your odor management plan is how are you going to manage complaints if they come in, which means you have to learn how to manage risk communications and have a protocol for handling the complaint. Now, unfortunately, many people will not contact you. They will contact the state regulators, and the state regulators then have to come to your site and verify the accuracy of the complaint. And that's where the transient and changeable nature of odors gets so complex, is that by the time the regulator gets to your site, the odor is gone. But if you could get them to talk to you, it's important that you be proactive, that you keep the community informed, that you communicate what's your odor management plan. You have to treat everybody seriously and respectfully, which is terribly challenging when they're being emotional and angry and upset. And you have to give them some information that helps them to describe the odors. If you look here on the right, you'll see what's called an odor wheel. And this is a device where you can characterize certain odors by their perception. You can take it to another level of detail as to what these odors smell like. And then you get to the chemicals that are causing the odors. And that helps you understand where are these odors coming from. What feedstock might be producing these odors. You must have a complaint protocol. I recommend you use a standard form that records this information that you see here. You have to verify if you can. Always be open and above board and outgoing with the regulators and whoever's complaining, and document everything. This is a odor complaint form or a log recommended by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Their program is called FIDO, which, as you see here in the red underlined letters, stands for frequency, intensity, duration, and offensiveness. And it's trying to standardize the entire odor complaint process. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jorge. I can figure out how to do
Great.
that.
Thank you so much, Craig. You can keep up that screen if you want for a second. Just want to let everybody know that if you have any questions, you can use the question box on the right-hand side to add any questions. But since I don't see any right now, we'll just jump quickly into Gary's. So if you have any questions for myself, Craig, or Gary, just feel free to add them in there. So let's get Gary here set up. Okay, just pass the controls over to you, Gary. Gary Gittere, he heads sales and marketing for McGill Premium Compost Products. He draws from over 15 years of regional and national sales, managerial, and marketing expertise to expand McGill's 25-year competency. Gary is in charge with leading McGill's compost market development team as the company prepares to open additional industrial-scale compost manufacturing facilities. He has focused on the development and presentation of technical training programs for professionals in the turf grass, landscaping, agriculture, and environmental industries, including engineers and spec writers, tasked with the development and management of programs for stormwater and erosion control in the North Carolina, Virginia, and South Carolina markets. Gary has a business degree from Salisbury University and is the board treasurer for the North Carolina Composting Council. Gary, over to you.
Thank you, Jorge. Good morning, everyone. Just a quick note in reference to Craig's wonderful presentation. At McGill, we consider those odors smell like money. Of course, sometimes when folks come in, they think that money is a little older than others, but great presentation. So Jorge asked me to just provide a quick overview of some of the support opportunities that are out there if you're starting your composting facility or you're in the process of increasing what you're trying to do. And of course, the number one opportunity is the U.S. Composting Council.
Hey,
Jorge
Gary?
outlines some. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but your screen is not showing for some reason.
Okay.
On the top right, there's a play button that says show screen. Do you have that?
How's that? We up
Okay,
yet?
now it's showing. All right, thank you. I'll mute myself.
Great, thank you. Didn't have to do that last time. All right, super. So the U.S. Composting Council, and here on this slide just gives a little overview of who they are and what they're all about. If you're not familiar with them, you can certainly go to their website, compostingcouncil.org. As I said, Jorge referenced some of the programs that they offer out there. Their focus is on, in conjunction with their sister organization, the Research and Education Foundation, they're focusing on helping the composting community utilize their product to create healthy soils and, of course, create more of a sustainable society. The next slide, we can get that to go down. Now it won't go anywhere. There we go. So here's just an overview of some of their membership levels, and you can go to their website again and look at the opportunity. Everything from as little as $100 to be an associate member will provide you some wonderful programs. Jorge mentioned that the conference this year is going to be held in Atlanta, Georgia. So for all of us here on the East Coast, that's a wonderful opportunity. I've been fortunate to go out there for 3 years in a row. This year they held it in LA. It was their 25th anniversary. A long time they've been conducting their conferences, and some wonderful presentations and the day before workshops. So there's certainly opportunity if you become a member to save some money on that conference as well. One of the other things that they're working on is continue to create more marketing opportunities. Just launched in conjunction with the International Compost Awareness Week is the Compost Story, and this is a little small film that utilizes some of our TV and movie stars out there, and you can go to that website, thecompoststory.com, to see the film, which is produced by Kiss the Ground. It's a wonderful, wonderful piece that if you've got a website, you can put it up on your website and give you an opportunity of getting people to understand the benefits of composting and the use of compost as well. So something a little closer, another support system is the North Carolina Composting Council. As Jorge said, I am a board member as well as he, and we are a state chapter celebrating our 10th year as being approved as an affiliated organization of the U.S. Composting Council. And our goal is to continue promoting those same items that the U.S. Composting Council is doing here in a more local level. So what have we been doing here in North Carolina? Well, I made a short list of some of the items that we have focused on. The board members have committed to a monthly board meeting, and we start that out in January by hosting an annual retreat. This provides us an opportunity to determine what are the wonderful goals that we want to prioritize, to figure how we want to accomplish them. We work through mostly our working board and are looking for volunteers. Last year we distributed our initial annual report, We'll be finalizing 2016 this month. We are affiliated with several members and different organizations, the Green Industry Council being one that we're very proud to be part of. They hold a water symposium conference at NC State in June on the 22nd, and we are a member of this organization that participate in that particular symposium as well. We also participate in the Green and Growing Show through the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Association, a partner that they're also with the Green Industry Council. The New Plant Science Initiative with NC State, we are a supporter of that program, committed some funds to that. They just released an article on a task force that's continuing to work on putting that together. This year we'll be holding our 4th annual members meeting. It'll be held at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum on June 29th, and we would encourage anyone that wants to come to learn more about what's happening at the North Carolina Composting Council to attend this wonderful event. It's a morning of speakers and a little bit of opportunity for people to tell us exactly what they would like to see the council to continue working on. And then in the afternoon, we're going to have a special tour with the folks from the Arboretum so we can go through the gardens, and they'll tell us a little bit about what they're all about and what they're doing as well. As Jorge mentioned, the U.S. Composting Council, they conduct the Compost Operators Training Course. We have been designated for several years to conduct that course here in North Carolina on the 2nd week of September. As Jorge mentioned, it's a wonderful opportunity to understand how to compost, taking his presentation to a much higher level, obviously. It's very hands-on, a great opportunity to visit some local composting facilities, and as he mentioned, we'll have an additional stop this year. Again, you can go to the U.S. Composting Council's website if you're interested in registering for that. And then some of the other things that we work with is the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. We exhibit and sponsor with those folks, and Caterpillar, one of their manufacturing facilities are located here in the Triangle area, and they've been kind enough to help put on a training event. We've held for the past 2 years and looking to do it again this year in November. So if you have any operators that want to learn wonderful things about their material, their products, then have a chance to attend that as well. So what does the future hold for the North Carolina Compost Council? Well, we continue to focus on education. That certainly is our priority. We want people to understand that that's a benefit of gaining more knowledge about composting and the use of composting. The Compost Council Research and Education Foundation has a scholarship program. Last year's recipient was actually a young lady at NC State who is going to be doing a small presentation at our annual meeting in June. So if you have an opportunity to come, you can hear her speak. And this year, we've committed to supporting that program as well as a local state scholarship program. We are continuing to look at ways of supporting research programs here in the state and throughout the country. We are finalizing a map that you'll be able to utilize on our North Carolina Compost Council website that will let the residents understand where they can purchase compost, everywhere from compost manufacturers that are making it and selling it to the public, as well as to all the different resellers and garden centers throughout the state of North Carolina. We've just started working on a long-term strategic planning that will provide us a 5- and 10-year plan on how we're going to continue moving the North Carolina Compost Council forward. We've looked at hiring an executive director, putting some programs in place to determine how we can do that. And of course, all this can only happen if we continue to work with folks to help get involved. So we're looking for anyone that would like to be part of the council. We have a board member meeting yesterday, and what that provided us was an opportunity to talk about adding one more board member who will be introduced at our annual meeting. We had a little bit of a change this past year with Rhonda Sherman and Frank Francosi moving on to different opportunities. providing us an opportunity to bring in some new folks on the board. So if you'd be interested in either becoming a supporter of the North Carolina Compost Council or a member of the U.S. Compost Council or just want to help us out, please do not hesitate to reach out to either Jorge or myself, or go to our website at carolinacompostcouncil.com. So if you have any questions, certainly feel free to ask myself or Jorge or Craig. I'll pass it back to Jorge.
Great. Thank you so much, Gary. I am just going to show all of you guys something really quick. The CCREF, they have a scholarship fund that the North Carolina Composting Council is also going to contribute. The deadline is June 30th. So if you know of any students in universities in the whole U.S. That may be eligible for this, please share this with them. All right. So with that, we'll pass it on to questions. Adam had a question for Craig. I'll just read out loud, and then Craig, if you want to unmute yourself. Craig, you mentioned that the biofilter for a windrow should not cover the bottom 2 feet of the pile. Does the same rule apply for ASP composting?
Somewhat less so, because in aerated static pile composting, you are in most cases operating in forced or positive aeration, blowing air into the pile. And there you would actually want to cover the biocover extending over the entire pile, because the force of the air going into the pile will carry odors out through the side of the pile. If you're using it in negative air, you don't need a biocover. In fact, you would not want to use one, because you want to be able to suck air down into the pile and pull it through and then treat the exhaust air with a biofilter on the back end.
Great.
Back to you.
Craig. I guess a question for you, Craig. Have you seen facilities that have traditionally used open windrow systems experiment with aerated static piles and eventually make a full transition to ASP systems to help with not only odors but also with the with increasing the material throughput of the facilities?
Yes, I have. There's 2 ways to do it. There are some systems out there now. Some composters out there are using what are called aerated windrows, which is the same as a windrow configuration, but with a long aeration trench beneath the windrow that blows air up into the bottom of the windrow. And others I've seen done where they will build 1 or 2 aerated static piles and do sort of a pre-composting of the mix for 5 to 7 days under forced aeration, because that's when you have your highest oxygen demand because of the decomposition, and that's where you need the most oxygen. Then pull it out of the aerated static pile system and finish it out in windrows. And that's often done where a composter wants to stage construction costs or spread the costs out over a period of time. Build two aerated static pile systems this year, 2 more next year, and so forth and so on, until the entire facility is converted to aerated static pile.
Great, thank you. I think we have a question from Jacqueline. I think I've unmuted you. I think you were raising your hand through this webinar system. Okay, maybe not. I can't really hear you. If you have a question, okay, she's going to type it in. I guess meanwhile, Gary, would you mind just going over really briefly the different markets that you're seeing out here on the North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina area in terms of how much they're willing to pay for high quality compost? Maybe not going into full details, but just so people can keep that in mind as they're trying to find newer markets for their own compost.
Sure. So that is probably one of our biggest challenges out there, is trying to develop the value for compost, and for anyone that's starting out. One of the things that we see is there are certain composters that have to give away the product. So the goal with my company has been to continue developing those markets as well as many of the companies throughout the country. You find that when you have a rougher product that you can use in the agricultural industry, that you'll find that that product will come in at a much lower cost, maybe $5 a cubic yard, depending on what you set your price at. But as you start to develop into the more higher end markets specific to landscaping or even sports fields, then if you're selling it, again, depending on how you're going to distribute it out there, you can get 2, 3, 4 times the cost of what you may get for an agriculture product. Now, if you're OMRI certified, that'll certainly play into it, and some folks can get even more so. That's a great opportunity to get a good bit of money for your product. But again, there's a lot more involved into that. There are a lot of organizations, a lot of agriculture folks that are looking for OMRI and certified compost available out there. The sports turf market is one that we see continuing to understand the value of amending their soils, and something that that you can actually get a little bit higher value on. And lastly, the biggest thing that you have to be cognizant of is, certainly if you're selling it in bulk, and even in some cases bags, the freight aspect of it. So the further you are away, of course, the more expensive it's going to get out there, and so that can play into what you can charge for your product as well.
Great, thank you, Gary. There's another question here from Jacqueline. Are there any temperatures that are too high? For example, if you use a permeable cover, could the pile get too hot? Yeah, there's definitely some temperatures that are pretty high up when you get into the areas of maybe around 180 or so, that you may want, that may be a trigger for you to turn your pile or to turn on your air so that you can bring down those temperatures. In terms of covers, I don't have too much experience with that, so I'm going to pass it on to Craig if you would like to add anything.
Well, there are several different kinds of covers. One is the permeable polyethylene fleece covers, such as the ones sold by Compost Tech, and those are very permeable, so you really don't get that elevated temperature problem. With the microporous fabrics, which are all sold by Gore and by a company on the West Coast called Managed Organics Recycling, those are all aerated static pile systems, so they are blowing air into the pile, and that helps cool the pile and keep the temperature from running away. The third kind are the ones like Engineered Compost Systems uses, and they are literally plastic tarps with air holes, but that's run in negative aeration mode, so a lot of that heat is sucked out of the pile with the exhaust air. But as Jorge said, you have to monitor your temperatures on a regular basis. And if you see temperatures climbing much above 165 or 170, you've got to do something about it, because once you cross the 180-degree threshold, bacterial action stops and chemical oxidation begins. And chemical oxidation is what leads to spontaneous combustion, and that is a real problem.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any other questions? Laura, do you have any questions?
No, that all was really amazing. I don't have any questions.
All right, so I guess before we wrap up, I'll just pass it on to Craig and then Gary, if you guys want to add a few, some final thoughts before we end the webinar.
Thank you, Jorge. I think it's important for everybody to understand that composting, while we do it in our backyards and it's kind of fun and it's neat and it's educational, when you do it on a commercial scale, pardon me, when you do it on a commercial scale, you are really building a biological manufacturing facility. And you have to think of it as a manufacturer, where you're taking in these materials that we call feedstocks. You are converting those feedstocks with the help of microbes to compost, and then you are taking this product and distributing it in a marketplace in the American economy, where some people may want to buy compost, more people will probably want to buy some form of compost amended soil. And so you have to be good at two different industries. You have to be very good at waste management, on the feedstock end, which requires you to be reputable, responsible, and reliable. And on the back end, you have to sell a product in the American economy, which requires that you be dedicated, determined, and disciplined. And with that, I wish all of you success in whatever composting adventures you choose to follow.
Thank you, Craig. Gary?
Thank you, Jorge. Yeah, I echo what Craig just outlined, especially on the aspect of selling the product itself. I feel that that's probably one of the biggest challenges that a lot of companies have out there, is understanding how they can, move the product that they've created. Not everybody understands the value of the product, the ability to utilize it. So using organizations like the U.S. Composting Council or the North Carolina Composting Council can provide you with some of that support. I've learned over the years that I've been involved in the industry by talking to folks that it takes a lot more to educate myself. If you're going to work into that turf grass market, you really need to understand exactly what they're looking for, certainly from a landscaping perspective, from an agriculture perspective. So there's a lot of opportunities out there, but you've got to educate yourself and be able to understand exactly how you can sell in those markets. So again, as Craig said, best of luck to everybody and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Gary. And I'll just leave you guys with one last thought that as if you're starting or if you are transforming your methodology of composting to a new system, start out small, try it out first. Experiment at a small scale with 1 windrow instead of 20 windrows, and become comfortable with a new method before you do it at a large scale, just so that you can make a nice transition into it. So starting small and working your way up, and feel free to reach out to any one of us. EPA Region 4 has excellent resources here in the state. There's, besides me, there's a couple of other people that are really have a lot of knowledge in composting. There's also Craig that works throughout the area, and Gary's here too. So with that, and being cognizant of time, I would like to say thank you. We'll keep you updated. We're going to organize a couple of other webinars in partnership with the EPA Region 4. I think the next one, we may do it in August. It's going to be on food waste hauling. And we'll have a few more surprises, I think. Laura, anything else that you would like to add?
No, thank you so much, all of you. Craig, Jorge, and Gary, y'all are all amazing, and thank you for providing all this knowledge. And I look forward to working on more webinars like this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good week. Happy International Compost Awareness Week again. Bye.